Hi, it's early January, first week of January, just after the New Year and the Christmas break. I'm Rob Watson, and this is the first in a series of Soundwalks I'm going to do, which means wandering about Leicester with a microphone, hopefully not just by myself, but meeting up with other people to do a socially distanced Soundwalk. And what that's going to involve is really just kind of short walks, things that we take for granted, where when we go to the shops, when we go to work, when we go and visit friends, when we used to be able to go and visit the pub, that kind of stuff. And along the way, just having a listen to what's around us and to think about and describe and explain in sound pictures, I suppose, the kind of environment that we live in. So there's no particular plan for this. There's no expectations that there's going to be any kind of profound inspirational discussion or conversation. It's really just a case of listening, reflecting on where we are and how we get around. So my regular route into the centre of Leicester is along Narborough Road. I'm just starting off on Foss Road South. As you can probably hear in the background, there's quite a bit of traffic. One of the things you do get in Leicester is a lot of people driving around in cars with the kind of loud exhausts. So they're kind of chasing around, being boy racers, I suppose. And that can be quite loud and annoying at times. I don't drive personally, so everywhere I get to is on foot or on a bicycle. And kind of the traffic noise through the lockdown has really varied. You know, there are moments when it's been massively reduced, and there are moments where it still remains quite loud and intrusive. And I'm just standing watching the traffic flow on Foss Road South. There's a couple of people out walking, but not many. There's very few cyclists, if ever, along Foss Road South. The traffic always moves at kind of fairly brisk pace, and it's not, it's not a kind of welcoming kind of low, a calm traffic area. It's a constant through flow of traffic going from one place to another. And I think over the years people have been diverted onto the side roads off the main roads. So Narborough Road is quite congested at times. So the apps that people have now and the traffic direction devices that they have in their cars are putting them into different routes. So let's just have a listen for a few minutes. Actually, it's gone quite quiet for the moment, and there's a car wash, hand car wash just behind me, and that's closed today. So maybe I'll pop back at some point and record the sound of that. That's always quite a prominent sound. So I'm going to head down to Narborough Road and see. It's going to be difficult because there's not much open in terms of the shops, but Narborough Road's always busy, and let's have a listen to what's going on down there. So I'm just walking down West Coast Drive. One of the things you notice in Leicester is the age of the vehicles, the cars. I think Leicester has one of the highest proportion of older cars on the road, certainly the centre of Leicester. So there's a lot of diesel engines, cars with 10, 15 years old. They look largely okay from the outside. I don't drive. I can't tell the difference between a new car and an old car. They all merge into one, as far as I'm concerned. But there is a kind of age problem with vehicles in Leicester now, is that they're higher polluting, noisier, and they're cheaper than in most places, or in other places, wealthier places in the country. One of the other things you also notice, just to describe West Coast Drive, it's tree lined, but the city council only seems to come out maybe once or twice a year to give the side roads a good sweep, and there's a lot of debris from the trees. And when the leaf fall happened back in November, it's only really been fairly superficially tidied up and cleaned away. So there's a lot of brown sludge of decaying leaves in various places, which is quite slippy. It might kind of break up if we get some frost and it freezes over and then gets washed away in the rain, but it's like a 6-month process. Whereas, I suppose people don't come out and sweep their roadsides as much as they used to do, but there's certainly, it can be quite slippy in places around here. Likewise, the kind of pavements are very up and down and uneven, very almost treacherous to walk along. They're broken in many places, and they haven't been resettled consistently in many years. There's a small amount of work taking place on Narborough Road, where they've started to finally resurface some of the pavements. But it's for whatever reason where the funding comes from the council has been restricted over the last few years. That kind of sense of pavement renewal hasn't yet caught up around here, and I kind of wonder whether it'll be a priority in the future as other needs come to the fore. But as a kind of a neighbourhood where I've lived now for nearly 10 years, it's kind of almost like a steady, slow decline. Lampposts are not straight. They're quite signage on the streets is kind of quite dirty. They're not regularly cleaned. The upkeep. It's a high density area around here, so there's lots of bins left out in the middle of the pavements that you have to navigate. What I'll do at some point is take some photos of this and post them up on a blog so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But I'm just heading now to the junction of Narborough Road and West Coast Drive, which is where 9 Bar is, which opened for a short while, for a few weeks, when the lockdown restrictions were lifted, but is closed again now. There's a dog in a car. So I'm out on Narborough Road, and lots of the shops are closed. There's a couple of takeaways open and restaurants and the small supermarkets that you get along here. It really has changed in the last 10 years. I remember there being very little along Narborough Road. It was largely hosiery and kind of warehouse outlet shops, which weren't open to the public. A few greengrocers and newsagents, that kind of thing. And then, kind of over the 10 years, there's been an increase in international businesses opened up along Narborough Road. And there was a report a few years ago from the London School of Economics that outlined that Narborough Road is one of the most internationally diverse streets in the country, high streets in the country. Opposite me is a new restaurant, Bronco's, which is a kind of burgers and wraps and chicken wings, that kind of stuff, flame grilled meat. And I'm stood next to the Istanbul restaurant, which is a kebab, Turkish kebab restaurant, which is always very busy. And opposite that is a Johnny Custard, the sweet bar. There's not that many people out and about today. It's busier of an evening sometimes. The sun is hanging pretty low, even though it's mid-afternoon now. It won't be long before it's dark again, and such is January. So I've come to the end, what we call the top end of Narborough Road, which is where it's crossed by Hinckley Road into Braunston Gate, which is kind of where the big Tesco's is. Braunston Gate's a funny little area, really. The expectation was a few years ago, I think, that it was going to be quite a trendy area with bars, bustling area with lots of kind of diverse local businesses, but it's never really achieved liftoff. So there's a few bars around here now, actually, a few places like the Dog House. There's the Gate 66 is one of those bars that keeps opening and closing and coming and going. Next to that is the West End Brewery, and then the other way is Natterjack's, and there was a nightclub, kind of Sumo, which you might have seen in the press recently as I think it's lost its licence because of the discovery of a cannabis factory, which is quite a regular occurrence in this area, in this part of Leicester. There's often regular features in the Leicester Mercury for raids on discoveries of properties that are being used to farm cannabis in the area. So Braunston Gate has kind of been traffic calmed a little bit as part of the pandemic response and the lockdown, in order to give a little bit more space and to allow a little bit more freedom, a little bit more space for people on bicycles and people who are walking into the city centre. Things like the 96 Degrees coffee shop have had a really difficult time because they've not been able to open consistently for the last 9 months. If you remember, here in Leicester, it was March that we went into lockdown, as we did nationally, and we only really came out of any lockdown, a lower level of lockdown, sometime in September, and that didn't last very long either. So behind me is the large Tesco, which is kind of the central hub here. It's always quite busy and brisk. Quite a few people do their regular shopping there, and there's quite a few Tesco's in Leicester, more than other supermarkets. They seem to have a strong presence nearby. I think within about 1.5 kilometres there's about 6 Tesco's in this part of Leicester. Why the concentration on this end of the town? Partly due to footfall, I think, and the kind of route into the city centre that gets used quite frequently. So I'm just passing the Black Horse. It's a pub that, again, who knows whether all of these kind of bars and pubs will be reopening. The bus route still comes through Braunston Gate, but there's not very many people on the buses at the moment. A lot more people are driving rather than walking or cycling, and I suppose that's maybe partly due to the weather. That clang and sound is a regular feature on Braunston Gate. There's a manhole cover that doesn't fit correctly, and every time a car drives over it, it makes an increasingly loud bang. I'm now just walking past the De Montfort University Sports Centre, and between what they call the venue, which is a place where they hold public events, there's a pathway which follows up to the River Soar, and which the route goes through to Castle Gardens and then into the city centre. So I'm now just walking up to the bridge which crosses the River Soar, which was put in a few years ago when the area was slightly redeveloped. And it does make the walk into Leicester slightly more pleasant. You can avoid the main road, and you get to see a lot of the birds that are floated that live on the river or visit the river. There's always a good number of swans. At the moment we've got seagulls who come inland, and there are ducks, and really I probably should know a lot of the different types of birds that are there if I spend some time thinking about it. You get a lot of cyclists come through this route, and one of the regular features with Leicester is the food delivery cyclists are kind of in and out on a regular basis. So I'm just strolling towards the bridge. There's probably 1 million pigeons around as usual, swans and geese and ducks. Let's see if we can capture some sounds from them. So I'm just walking across the bridge over the River Soar, and before me there's a dozen or so swans. There's little pigeons sitting on the steps. People come here and scatter food and bread, seeds for them. There's a lot of pigeons perched in some trees and on the bank of the river, which I've never really seen pigeons kind of around water before, but there's a group of them just on the very edge of the water line, and there's more flocking towards them, so maybe there's some food over there that somebody's scattered or has washed up, or they're keeping warm for some reason. On the left-hand side is the Castle Gardens, and during the summer, during the lockdown, there was regularly 30 or 40 guys, it was usually guys, stood having a drink. They brought their alcohol with them because the bars in the city centre were closed. So they were having their social meet-up and get-together al fresco. In Castle Gardens there's two ponds. Well, there's definitely one pond. The other one is more of a kind of depressed area that gets wet. But they're actually, in the springtime at the moment, they're quite, cut back. The vegetation is rotting, decomposing as it should do in the winter. And they are always very pleasant. It's a very kind of wild, very small but wild spot that's been nurtured quite carefully, and in the spring when we come back we can maybe start to see some of the life that's returning. Often this time of year, in the last few years, I've seen things like crocuses and snowdrops breaking through, but there's none around just yet. I think the temperatures that we're experiencing late December, early January are more consistent with winter, and the mild winters that we've had over a number of years now, this one isn't quite so mild. So it might be a bit more of a challenge for some of the residual wildlife that is hanging around in the centre. And it'd be really nice to do a walk at some point with somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to the kind of wildlife around the city. But the birds are out, and again, kind of March time, might be an opportunity to do a very early morning sound walk and see if we can capture any of the dawn chorus as that builds up through to June. So the guys who are having a drink are undercover today. There's a pavilion with some seats, and it's a regular thing for people to come and bring a beer and sit and have a drink. I suppose it's quite sociable in a way, but I'm not sure it's consistent with the lockdown. So as you come out of Castle Gardens, on the right-hand side you've got the Church of St Mary di Casto, which again would probably be a good place for a sound walk. There's a lot of history. I think it goes back to Norman times. It should have a spire, but that nearly a few years ago now, that collapsed, or was in danger of collapsing, so it was removed. And I think there's some fundraising to get the spire rebuilt. In front of me is some new student accommodation. One of the things with Leicester being a university city and having 2 universities, as with many cities in the UK, there's been a lot of funding, international funding. I think this is funded by the Chinese for accommodation, so kind of small, self-contained bedroom, bedsit type flats, 300 or 400 people in one building. This isn't too bad. It's got a brick fascia, so it's relatively close to the kind of architecture of the region. But opposite me now is the Holiday Inn, which was built in the 1960s and was part of the major redevelopment of Leicester, which ripped through the heart of the city. And again, it might be worth finding somebody who can do a history of the architecture and the road changes in Leicester. The inner ring road that was brought in the 1960s tore out a lot of the historically significant buildings and areas. And Leicester was a heavily not heavy industry, it was light industry. There's a lot of engineering and hosiery, and that has kind of died away since the 1980s. So there's been a substantial change in the kind of commerce that takes place in Leicester, and it's taken some time to catch up with other cities in terms of its redevelopment and its repurposing to suit a modern contemporary economy based around information, knowledge, that kind of thing. But it's happening. But the traffic ways are very car dependent. It's a spoke city. I'm just stood. There's always a stream of cars coming past, quite energetically, let's say. So I think it was back in April that I stood. There's an underpass which goes through underneath where the Holiday Inn is, and it was eerily quiet then for a few weeks, but now it's back to being kind of constantly busy. It always makes me wonder where people are going. I think there's a tendency in Leicester for people to just drive around in circles for no apparent reason. Maybe they have a life that I don't understand or comprehend, which means that it's essential that you have a car in order to be able to go from A to B to C to D in a loop, whereas I prefer to get out and walk and kind of visit places on foot or on my bike. And actually one of the good things in Leicester that's happened in the last couple of years is they're putting in a lot more cycle lanes, and shortly there will be some bicycles, the bikes that you hire from off the street available. I think that comes in January. So it's kind of edging in the right direction. It's just kind of frustrating with the lockdown, I suppose, that the focus on the car has come back. People are very reluctant to give up their vehicles, and still, as a first option, driving seems to be the immediate response to wanting to get around anywhere, rather than the second or third or fourth response as it maybe should be. But one of the things that I think would be nice to be able to hear, and this would be an interesting thing to explore in the future episodes of these Soundwalks, is the noise that bicycles make or don't make, because one of the things in Leicester you don't hear is the sound of bells, bicycle bells. People are quite reticent to use them. It's almost regarded as, maybe in a very English kind of way, of being quite rude to signal that you're on the road and that people should be aware of you. Just coming up to the cathedral. Just missed the chimes of the bells for 1:45 to 2. So we hang around at the cathedral for 10 or 15 minutes. Hopefully I'll be able to get the sound of the bells tolling. And that's the destination point really that I wanted to come to today, is Leicester Cathedral. Again, it was redeveloped a few years ago, and actually it's turned into an oasis of calm, and I think a really nice example of how a modern city would incorporate non-traffic or low traffic spaces where people can sit. It's nice to come on a warm, bright, pleasant day. People are often sitting chatting. People will bring a book. There is plenty of seating about. Again, like the rest of the country, the cathedral's been affected by the lockdown, so it's not been hosting regular services in the same way that it had. Opposite the cathedral, I'll just describe it for a moment, is the King Richard III Visitor Centre. And behind the cathedral is the Guildhall. So this is a kind of historical area in Leicester. Just beyond this is the St Martin's area, and it's actually, it's a relatively pleasant spot to kind of walk through. Once you've got past the main roads, there's a kind of rhythm and a pace to the journey. You go from home across Narborough Road, which is always quite busy and often quite busy with people, and then you walk through Braunston Gate across the bridge over the River Soar, where there's always plenty of birds and wildlife to be observed, and then up across the St Nicholas Way, and I could divert over to Jubilee Square, but actually kind of this time it's often nicer to come through by the cathedral. So what I want to think about doing in the future, and if you want to volunteer your time, it doesn't need any expertise, is to just come out on a walk for no more than an hour. I'll bring a microphone which I can extend, and we can keep it suitably socially distant, and we'll just take a stroll, maybe bring a flask with some coffee in. It'll just be a case of having a mooch around, which is one of my favourite things to do, just to be able to kind of stop and listen and look and maybe just reflect on the kind of things that we see around us, and just spark some thoughts. I don't have an axe to grind about any particular views or opinions, as long as they're respectful of other people's views and opinions. There doesn't need to be any kind of you won't get famous from doing this. There's personalities are probably better suited by seeking to do other types of activities, strong personalities that is, but if you've got a few thoughts and you're kind of happy to just express them and discuss them over a slow stroll around the town or the city in your favourite place. Is it how you get to work in the morning? Is it where you like to go for a stroll with your dog? Is it somewhere that you've maybe driven through and actually you think a walk through would be quite productive, as giving you a different experience and a different understanding of what goes on in that place? And then I'll piece them together. We'll intersperse them with some music, and maybe even put them out as a podcast to to back them up. So if you want to get in contact with me, the best way to do that is probably through Twitter, and look for Rob W Media on Twitter and Instagram. And you can send me an email, rob@robwatsonmedia.net. Send me a message and we can arrange a suitable time for a conversation.